I was supposed to be the villain who met a gruesome end, but instead, I backed the hero into a corner until he leaped from the 88th floor. I dismantled his secret empire, worth hundreds of billions, rebranded it, and folded it into my own conglomerate. To top it off, I won over his older sister, Victoria Sterling, making her my wife and the true power behind my corporate throne. But the story didn't end there. The day I returned to the Sterling estate, Isabella Bennett charged at me with a child in her arms and slammed her fist into my chest. She screamed that I was a bastard for vanishing for years. The little boy she held was a mirror image of me, and he even reached out to grab my collar, calling me daddy, as if he had practiced it 1,000 times. My wife, Victoria, stood there with a sharp smile while digging her nails into my side, her gaze radiating pure danger. In that moment, it finally clicked. The reason my frenemy, Leo Sterling, had gambled his life and his entire fortune on me was because this twisted romance we were living in wasn't just a simple story. It spanned multiple timelines. The moment I realized I was just a disposable henchman in a trashy romance novel, I decided to pivot and set my sights on the hero's fiancée, Isabella. By the next morning, a livid Leo Sterling was already at my front door, looking like he wanted to tear me apart. Before he could even get a word out, I cut him off with an annoyed sigh. Isabella isn't married to you yet, Leo. Who she spends her time with is her business. Why is it so hard for you to respect her autonomy? Isabella was even more blunt, stepping forward and landing a sharp slap across his face. Are you seriously still obsessed with that first-time nonsense? Your archaic mindset is honestly pathetic. Leo, the man who secretly controlled a multi-billion-dollar empire, stood there and took every word of our verbal abuse. He gritted his teeth and chose to suffer in silence, not offering a single word in his own defense. It wasn't until I pushed him to the absolute breaking point that he finally flexed his corporate muscles, systematically dismantling my company until I was forced into bankruptcy. Even as the debt piled up like a mountain, I didn't break a sweat. Bankruptcy was exactly what I wanted, as it allowed me to transition perfectly into the role of a struggling scholarship student at NYU. Better yet, the script dictated that upon graduation, I would end up working at his firm as his personal executive assistant. My name is Davis Vance, and I am the designated villain of this story. If I followed the original plot, I was supposed to spend my days antagonizing Leo and obsessively stalking Isabella. I was meant to wait for the big reveal where Leo drops his nice guy act, shows his true colors as a corporate shark, and grinds me into the dirt. But since this is a cliché-ridden trope fest, Leo has to play the role of the long-suffering martyr for now, letting everyone walk all over him. Everyone gets a turn to kick him while he is down. Since I am destined to lose in the end anyway, I figure I might as well have some fun and make his life a living hell first. I pulled out my phone and dialed Isabella's number. "Hey, Isabella," I said, keeping my tone light and effortless. "Feel like grabbing a drink?" I heard Aura just hired a new mixologist who is supposed to be a literal god behind the bar. In the original story, Isabella and I were childhood best friends who shared every secret. Even after her eventual marriage to Leo, she was supposed to spend more time with me than with her own husband. It would take Leo finally snapping and destroying my life for her to be moved by his passion and realize she loved him. That was his pathetic version of winning back his true love. As expected, she didn't even hesitate. "Sure, give me 30 minutes, she said. Half an hour later, Isabella swept into the most secluded booth at Aura. She was wearing a simple black slip dress with zero accessories, yet it hugged her curves in all the right places. Her skin was flawless and radiant under the dim lounge lights. With a face that could easily grace the cover of Vogue, she made every other girl in the bar look like they were trying too hard. She took the cocktail I offered, and after one sip, a soft glow began to settle on her cheeks. What brings the busiest man in Manhattan out of hiding? I assumed Mr. Vance had forgotten what the sun looked like, she teased. I leaned back against the leather sofa and gave her a long, concerned look. "I'm never too busy to worry about you, Isabella. You look exhausted. You even have dark circles under your eyes. The work will always be there, but you need to find some balance." Her expression softened at my words. You are right. I haven't felt this relaxed in ages. All the drama with Leo has been draining the life out of me. As the drinks kept coming, Isabella started venting about Leo. I played the part of the perfect listener, nodding in sympathy and offering just enough agreement to keep her going. Just as the mood was getting intimate, Isabella's phone buzzed aggressively on the table. The caller ID flashed a familiar name, Leo Sterling. Isabella scowled and declined to call immediately. But Leo was persistent, calling back again and again. I watched her face shift from mild annoyance to genuine irritation, and finally to pure rage. I waited for the perfect moment to speak up. Isabella, it is getting late. Maybe you should head back? Leo seems pretty desperate to reach you. To hell with him, she snapped, letting out a cold snort. We said we were staying out tonight, didn't we? No one is leaving until we are at least a little buzzed. She glared at her phone with a stubborn glint in her eyes. I'm going to make him shut up once and for all. She hit redial and put on speakerphone. Leo's frantic voice immediately filled the booth. Isabella, where are you? It is way too late for you to be out. Send me your location right now. I'm coming to get you. Leo, do I seriously need to give you a play-by-play of my entire life now? Isabella's voice was suddenly ice cold. I am your fiancée, Isabella. I have every right to know where you are so I can keep you safe. Safe? Or are you just trying to control me? She shot back with a mocking laugh. Leo, I am a grown woman. Are you telling me I don't have the freedom to go out for a single drink? That is not what I meant. I'm just worried. Anything could happen to a woman alone at night. Relax. I am much safer in a crowded bar than walking the streets alone, Isabella said, cutting him off. She looked me straight in the eye as she added, besides, Davis is right here with me. I leaned in closer to the phone with a smug grin. Don't worry about a thing, Leo. I will make sure Isabella is very well taken care of. Hearing my voice, Leo absolutely lost it. Davis? What the hell are you doing with Isabella? Leo, stop screaming. Isabella snapped, her temper finally flaring. Davis and I have been friends since we were kids, and you know that. We're just having a drink. Why are you acting like a psycho? I'm hanging up. I will deal with you when I get home tomorrow. She ended the call, blocked his number, powered off the phone, and shoved it deep into her purse. She rattled the ice in her empty glass. There, he is handled. Now, let's drink until we can't stand up. Exactly, I agreed, refilling her glass. We shouldn't let irrelevant people ruin such a perfect evening. I kept the drinks flowing with a smile. A few rounds later, Isabella's eyes were glazed over, and her face was flushed a deep crimson. I think that is enough for now, I said, gently placing my hand over hers. Her skin felt incredibly soft and warm. Come on, Isabella, let's call a night. Any more, and you're going to have a killer migraine tomorrow, and I hate seeing you in pain. Let's go. I will get you to a room so you can sleep it off. I feel a little spinny, she mumbled, looking at me through a drunken haze. Okay, Davis, whatever you say. She leaned into me, letting me guide her toward the hotel suite I had reserved hours in advance. Once we were inside the room, she noticed I wasn't heading for the door, and a flicker of confusion crossed her face. Davis, aren't you going to your own room to sleep? I put on my best look of awkward realization. Oh, Isabella, I am so sorry. I completely forgot to book a second room, and the front desk said they are totally sold out now. I pulled a few thin blankets from the closet and started spreading them on the floor. Don't worry about it. I can just crash here for the night. Isabella's gaze softened as she looked at the pathetic little makeshift bed on the hardwood floor. You can't sleep like that, Davis. You have a huge meeting tomorrow morning. She hesitated for a moment before speaking up. Why don't you just sleep on the bed? We can each stay on our own side. I acted like I was struggling with the ethics of it. I don't know, Isabella. A guy and a girl in one bed? If Leo ever found out, he would lose his mind. The mere mention of his name reignited her fury. She grabbed my arm and practically hauled me onto the mattress. Screw him. We are friends, Davis. We have nothing to hide. Only a paranoid freak like Leo would try to make this into something dirty. All right, if you say so, I said, lying down beside her. But with the two of us alone and the alcohol humming in our veins, the lines between friendship and something more began to blur very quickly. I tentatively slid my arm around her waist, and she didn't pull away. Once that barrier was broken, nature took its course. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that we finally finished our long night together. She fell into a deep, satisfied sleep, completely exhausted. By the time I woke up, the sun was already streaming through the curtains. I stretched and looked over at her. She was still out cold, looking peaceful. I moved quietly to avoid waking her, got dressed, and planned to head down to the hotel restaurant for some brunch. But the moment I pulled the door open, a very familiar figure was standing right there. Leo Sterling was standing in the hallway, looking like he hadn't slept a wink. His eyes were bloodshot and wild. When his gaze landed on the marks on my neck, his face went pale. His heart was likely breaking, but his pride was taking an even bigger hit. "Davis," he hissed, my name sounding like a curse through his gritted teeth. "What the hell did you do to Isabella?" I narrowed my eyes and shot back without a hint of guilt. "Leo, what is that supposed to mean? Isabella isn't your property. You aren't married, and you don't own her time or her body. Who she chooses to be with is her decision. Can you, for once in your life, treat her like a human being with her own agency?" My high and mighty act actually caught him off guard for a second. He looked like he wanted to kill me right there, but after a tense standoff, he tried to shove past me to get into the room. "Where is she? I need to see Isabella." "Hold on," I said, blocking his path. "She is still asleep. Are you really going to barge in there while she is vulnerable and half-conscious just to satisfy your own ego?" I made sure to sound extra condescending. "Just stay here. I will go in and see if she even wants to talk to you." That was the final straw. Leo finally snapped, his fists clenching until his knuckles were white. "Davis," he growled, "I am her fiancée. You are the one who took advantage of her. Now, get out of my way." Our shouting match was apparently loud enough to wake the dead, because I heard movement from inside the suite. There was a frantic rustling sound, and then the door swung wide. Isabella stood there, her hair a mess and her clothes slightly disheveled. The sight of her like that seemed to shatter the last of Leo's delusions. Seeing Leo standing there looking like a kicked puppy, Isabella clearly felt a momentary pang of guilt. But then she shot me a sharp, questioning look. I immediately stepped forward and took her hand, my voice dripping with fake remorse. "I am so sorry, Isabella. This is all on me. I had way too much to drink last night and lost my head." My performance was flawless. The anger vanished from her face, replaced by a weary sigh. "It wasn't just you, Davis. I wasn't exactly stopping you." Leo stood there, forced to watch us comfort each other and hold hands right in front of him. It was the final blow to his sanity. He lunged forward, trying to rip our hand apart. "Isabella, for God's sake, you are my fiancée. How can you stand there and hold hands with him right in front of me? Do I mean nothing to you?" Startled by his sudden aggression, Isabella reacted on pure instinct. She swung her hand and landed a thunderous slap across his face. The sound echoed through the quiet hotel hallway like a gunshot. Leo Sterling, the man who secretly ran a global empire and was rumored to have the combat skills of a Navy SEAL, just stood there and took it. Time seemed to freeze for a heartbeat. Leo touched his stinging cheek, his eyes wide with shock. "Isabella, you actually hit me?" She had acted on impulse, and for a split second, I could see the regret in her eyes. But the moment he spoke with that accusatory tone, her guilt evaporated. "So what if I did?" she said, her voice turning to stone. "Yes, I am technically your fiancé, Leo, but we both know that it's just a business arrangement. What I do in my private life is none of your business. And seriously, what century are you living in? Why are you so hung up on something as trivial as a first time? Only someone with a filthy mind sees something wrong here. I am sick to death of your self-righteous, patriarchal lectures on morality." Her verbal onslaught left Leo completely speechless. Even I, the one who orchestrated this whole mess, felt a tiny pang of pity for the guy. I stepped up and gently rubbed Isabella's back to calm her down. "Don't let him get to you, Isabella. Leo is just, well, he is just overprotective because he cares. If he actually loved me, he would try to understand me for once," she snapped. "Leo, I'm done talking to you. I will find my own way home tonight. Now, get out of my sight, she screamed. I swear to God, if you don't leave right now, I will never speak to you again as long as I live. That ultimatum hit Leo harder than any physical blow ever could. His face went deathly pale. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, to fix it, but all that came out was a defeated sigh. His shoulders slumped, and he looked like a broken man as he turned and walked away. I walked over to the window and watched him stumble out of the hotel lobby. The moment he hit the sidewalk, the sky opened up and a torrential downpour began to soak the city. The CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company didn't even have a car waiting for him. He just let the rain drench his expensive suit as he walked aimlessly down the street. He even stopped to clutch his stomach in pain, perfectly playing the role of the tragic, suffering hero. Once Leo was gone, I got Isabella some fresh clothes and spent some time calming her down before rushing back to my own office. The second I sat down at my desk, I started liquidating every asset I could get my hands on. I didn't have a choice. Leo might be a pathetic doormat when it comes to Isabella, but he is still the protagonist of this world. He might play mind games with her, but he would have no problem using his full power to erase a villain like me from existence. If I remembered the plot correctly, he wasn't supposed to make his move until the very end, after my company was already a hollow shell and I was reduced to begging for scraps. But by sleeping with Isabella, I had accelerated the timeline significantly. Given the look on his face this morning, I knew my downfall was coming much sooner than the script intended. The smartest move was to take the money and run before he could strike. But before I vanished, I had a theory I wanted to test. In these kinds of stories, there are certain rules that always apply. In these trashy romances, the hero's life is always plagued by 4 specific archetypes: the childhood best friend, the struggling student, the loyal assistant, and the unforgettable first love. I had already played the childhood friend card until it was burnt to a crisp. If my company went under, I figured I could just pivot into the struggling student role and keep making Leo's life a nightmare from a different angle. I didn't waste any time. I enrolled in a graduate program at NYU just to get the student ID. Then, I had my company make a massive, anonymous donation to the university scholarship fund. That way, when I finally declare bankruptcy, I would be the perfect candidate for a full-ride scholarship as a disadvantaged student. Sure enough, it wasn't long before Sterling Enterprises began its full-scale assault on my business. I was ready for them. I filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection before they could even land a solid blow. I surrendered so quickly that Leo's corporate machine didn't even have time to liquidate my personal holdings before the company was officially dead. The personal financial hit I took was negligible. Most of my wealth was already sitting safely in offshore accounts, more than enough to last me several lifetimes. On the day of the hearing, I showed up in a cheap, off-the-rack suit with a look of practiced devastation on my face. Camera flashes went off like fireworks as I hurried out of the courthouse with my head down. Hidden from the crowd, Leo Sterling sat in the back of his Rolls-Royce, watching my defeated departure with a cold, satisfied gaze. A faint, predatory smile played on his lips. I could almost hear his sycophantic assistant cheering in the background. My former assistant, Mia Miller, followed me out of the building, her eyes welling with tears at the sight of my supposed ruin. "Mr. Vance," she choked out. I patted her shoulder and handed her a business card. "I will be fine, Mia. You are young and talented. This firm is owned by a friend of mine abroad. They have a great culture and they are growing fast. You should give them a call. I need to get a campus," I added. "I have a lecture to catch." She took the card and watched in total confusion as I slung my backpack over my shoulder and headed straight for the subway station. Her boss had just lost everything, yet I looked more relaxed than I ever had when I was running a multi-million-dollar firm. And that company on the card, why did the name seem so hauntingly familiar to her? After leaving Mia, I made my way to the NYU campus. It was even more impressive than I had imagined. I had specifically chosen a pair of faded jeans, a plain t-shirt, and a beat-up backpack to blend in perfectly with the student body. I leaned into the simple life of a struggling student, enjoying cheap cafeteria food and killing time in the library. I even spent most of my lectures playing games on my phone. I was just waiting for my real target to show up. During a high-profile finance seminar, the dean introduced our guest speaker. She was a powerhouse alumna. She walked in wearing a perfectly tailored power suit, her makeup flawless and her presence commanding. She exuded an aura of elegant authority that demanded respect. Her sharp silhouette and confident stride screamed alpha female. My eyes lit up. There she was, Victoria Sterling. She was Leo's older sister and the acting CEO of Sterling Enterprises. Since Leo insisted on playing the wolf in sheep's clothing act, his family actually believed he was a lazy, incompetent trust fund baby. Nobody knew he was the secret mastermind behind a global empire. As a result, all the credit for Sterling Enterprises' massive success went straight to Victoria. Victoria was brilliant, but the company's meteoric rise was largely due to Leo secretly funneling resources into it. According to the original plot, he would never say a word about his contributions. He was waiting for the grand finale to reveal the truth and drown his family in guilt. Knowing this, I made sure to snag a seat in the front row and stayed highly vocal throughout her entire presentation. Having been a CEO myself, my grasp of market dynamics was light years ahead of the other students. Combined with my struggling student persona, the contrast was impossible for Victoria to ignore. Once the lecture ended and the crowd dispersed, Victoria made a point of stopping me for a private chat. "I have to say, I am impressed," she said with genuine interest. "It is rare to find a student with such a sophisticated understanding of these concepts. You are sharper than most of the so-called experts on my payroll." I gave her a humble, self-deprecating smile. "You are too kind, Miss Sterling. I just read a lot and try to connect the dots. It is all just theory, really." "I disagree," she said firmly, her eyes shining with clear admiration. "If you are interested, I would like to sponsor the rest of your education. And when you graduate, I want you to come work directly for me as my assistant." I let a look of pure, unadulterated joy wash over my face. "Are you serious? Thank you so much, Miss Sterling. You have no idea what this means to me." "I am very serious," she said with a warm smile. "And please, drop the formalities. Call me Victoria." She took a small step toward me, and I closed the gap. "Then I won't stand on ceremony, Victoria. I promise I won't let you down." As I settled into my role as Victoria's protege and confidant, our bond grew stronger with every meeting. One evening, she pulled up to my rundown apartment building in her luxury sedan to pick me up. She rolled down the window and looked at me. "We are having a small family dinner tonight, and I want you there." Her tone left no room for argument. I played the part of the hesitant guest. "Are you sure? I don't want to intrude on a family matter." "Nonsense," she said, cutting me off with a smile. "The strategies you suggested were genius. Our last quarterly earnings were the highest in the company's history. This dinner is practically in your honor, so you have to be there." I tried to protest one more time, but she hopped out of the car, walked around, and practically shoved me into the passenger seat. And just like that, I was being escorted to the Sterling family estate. The Sterling estate was located in Greenwich, Connecticut, in the most exclusive enclave of the ultra-wealthy. We drove through massive wrought iron gates and pulled up to a sprawling European-style manor. Inside, the foyer was lit by massive crystal chandeliers that reflected off the polished marble floors. The walls were adorned with abstract art that looked confusing but incredibly expensive. Every inch of the place whispered one thing: old money. "Make yourself at home. I'm going to go change into something more comfortable," Victoria said, leaving me in the grand living room. A moment later, a maid appeared with tea and a tray of delicate hors d'oeuvres. I was just taking a sip of tea when the front door swung open. A familiar figure stepped inside. I turned around to find myself face to face with Leo, whom I hadn't seen since my company went under. He tossed his keys onto a side table and started loosening his tie, his eyes scanning the room with bored indifference. When his gaze finally landed on me, his entire body went rigid with shock. That shock was instantly replaced by a wave of pure, unadulterated rage. "Davis," he hissed, storming across the room toward me. "What the hell are you doing in my house?" I can explain," I said, jumping to my feet and putting on my best look of panic confusion. Leo, Victoria invited me. She brought me here. Shut your mouth, he snarled. He got right in my face, his breath hot with anger. Was ruining Isabella's life not enough for you? Now you are coming after my sister? You don't even deserve to speak her name. He lunged forward to grab me by the collar. I scrambled backward, acting like I was terrified. I accidentally tripped over my own feet and went crashing to the floor. My teacup flew out of my hand and shattered against a marble with a loud crack that echoed through the entire house. What was that? What is going on? Victoria called out, practically running down the stairs. She had changed into a soft beige cashmere set, her long hair down, which made her look far less like a CEO and more like a protective older sister. She took in the scene at once. Me, sprawled on the floor, looking traumatized, and Leo, standing over me with his hand still raised and a look of murderous rage on his face. Victoria's face went cold. She rushed to my side and helped me up. Davis, are you all right? Did he hurt you? I think so. I am fine, I stammered, playing the victim to perfection. I let her support my weight, stealing a quick, terrified glance at Leo before looking away. I was the picture of a bullied underdog, too frightened to even defend myself. What is the meaning of this, Leo? Victoria demanded, her voice like a whip. Leo's pulse was visible in his neck. You're being played, Vic. This guy's a total sociopath, a complete scumbag. Victoria's voice was devoid of emotion. Oh, then please enlighten me. What exactly has he done to earn that title? Leo froze. He looked at his sister, his mouth working but no words coming out. He couldn't tell her the truth without exposing his own secrets. He wore that classic, I am suffering in silence for your own good expression that he loved so much. After a long, agonizing pause, he finally managed to choke out, Vic, you just have to trust me. He is dangerous. That is enough, Victoria snapped, her disappointment palpable. Leo, Davis is my guest and my colleague. He is the reason our numbers are up this quarter. Do you honestly think I am so incompetent that I can't judge a person's character? Meanwhile, I just watched you physically threaten him in my own home. Is this how you treat people? You two are the same age. Yet Davis is helping me run an empire while you do nothing but lounge around and spend money. And beyond that, where are your manners? Is this the kind of man our parents raised you to be? Her words were like stabs to his pride. I didn't even touch him. Leo screamed, his voice cracking. I reached out and gently touched Victoria's arm, looking up at her with pleading eyes. He is telling the truth, Victoria. Please, don't be mad. He didn't push me. I just lost my balance because I was startled. Stop defending him, Davis, Victoria said, her voice softening for me before turning back to Leo. She stepped toward her brother and delivered a stinging slap across his face. The sound was like a gunshot in the sudden silence of the room. The entire house went dead quiet. Leo stood there, clutching his burning cheek, staring at his sister in total shock. This was the woman who had spent his whole life protecting him, and now she had struck him because of me. His eyes were filled with a mix of betrayal and heartbreak. Get out, Victoria said, her finger pointing toward the door. Get out of this house right now, and don't you dare come back until you have learned how to show Davis some respect. Leo looked like his entire world had crumbled. He tried to speak, his eyes swimming with tears of frustration and hurt, but he eventually just turned and fled. Victoria didn't move until the sound of his car, fading away, filled the silence. She seemed to deflate, all her anger replaced by exhaustion. She turned to me, her eyes full of concern. Davis, I'm so incredibly sorry. I can't believe he acted like that. Are you sure you're okay? Nothing is broken? I shook my head gently. I am fine, Victoria. I just feel terrible for causing a scene in your home. This wasn't your fault, she said, her voice heavy with weariness. Leo has always been a problem, aimless and lazy. I thought he was just unmotivated, but I had no idea he was capable of such violence. If he had even half of your drive and maturity, my life will be so much easier. I reached out and took her hand in mine. Victoria, Leo is lucky to have someone like you looking out for him. He just doesn't realize what he has. One day, He will regret pushing you away. I lowered my voice, making it sound intimate. But I'm not like him. I will always cherish you. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she pulled me into a tight embrace. I know you will, Davis. I know you're nothing like the rest of them. With Leo gone, the family dinner turned into an intimate night for just the two of us. Victoria was still clearly shaken by the confrontation, so she opened a few bottles of beer to take the edge off. The alcohol content wasn't high, but she clearly had zero tolerance. After just a few sips, her face was flushed. The alcohol seemed to strip away her professional facade, revealing a side of her that was raw and impulsive. She became playful and almost aggressive with her new protege. She started by playfully pinching my cheeks, but that clearly wasn't enough for her, and soon she was leaning her entire weight against me. Victoria, you have had way too much to drink. Let me help you up to your room so you can sleep it off, I said, trying to be the voice of reason. My suggestion only seemed to provoke her further. I'm not drunk, she insisted, standing up and resting a silk-stockinged foot right on my lap. She looked down at me with a smile that was both dangerous and intoxicating. Tell me the truth, Davis. Do you really find me that unattractive? Why are you so desperate to get rid of me? It is not that. I started to say, but she didn't give me the chance to finish before she was all over me. I put up a token resistance, but I was no match for her sheer intensity. By the end of the night, she had completely taken charge, leading me back to her bedroom, where I played the part of the willing captive. After that night, things between Victoria and me moved at lightning speed. She began to rely on me for everything, both personally and professionally. I officially joined Sterling Enterprises as her executive assistant, becoming her right-hand man. Leo Sterling seemed to vanish into thin air, never returning to the estate or showing his face at the office, as if he had been erased from existence. I had successfully transitioned from a struggling student to a powerful executive assistant, effectively securing my position. However, the honeymoon phase didn't last long. Within a month, every project I touched began to fail spectacularly. We were either being outbid by mysterious shell companies or having long-term partners back out of deals at the 11th hour. It didn't take long for me to realize that Leo's secret conglomerate was working in the shadows to dismantle everything I built. My plot armor as the loyal assistant was wearing thin. I didn't waste a second. I immediately began liquidating the assets under my control and funneling the cash into my private offshore accounts. Since Leo was going to tank these projects anyway, I figured I might as well save the capital while I still could. Once the money was safe, I went to Victoria's office one evening looking like a broken man. Victoria, I need to apologize to you, I said, keeping my eyes fixed on the floor. She looked up from her paperwork, her expression filled with concern. An apology? Davis, what on earth for? Every project I have managed lately has been a disaster, and I have cost the company millions, I said, my voice trembling with fake guilt. I have done a lot of soul-searching, and I realize the problem is me. I am just a student with no real-world experience, and I am clearly not ready for a position of this magnitude. If I stay, I'm just going to keep dragging you down with me. Victoria immediately stood up and walked around her desk to comfort me. This isn't your fault, Davis, she said gently. Business is a battlefield, and everyone takes losses. You have done an incredible job considering the circumstances. No, Victoria, I said, looking her in the eye with a look of grim determination. I refuse to be a burden to you, and I won't have people whispering about nepotism behind your back. I have made up my mind. I'm going abroad to finish my studies and gain some real experience. I want to come back when I'm truly worthy of this position, so I can stand by your side as an equal. Victoria looked devastated at the thought of me leaving. Is going abroad really necessary? I can hire the best consultants in the world to mentor you right here in New York. Please, Victoria, I need to do this for myself, I said, taking her hands in mine. I want to become the kind of man you can actually lean on. Please, let me go. Seeing that I wouldn't be swayed, she finally gave in with a heavy heart. With her blessing, I was soon on a plane out of the country. As I settled into my seat, I thought about the familiar face I had spotted at the terminal. I allowed myself a small smile. Just you wait, Leo. When I return as the first love, who has finally come home, you won't even know what hit you. I spent a year living like royalty on my offshore accounts while padding my resume with impressive sounding credentials. When I finally returned to the States, Victoria was there to meet me at the airport, looking more radiant than ever. She had even rented out the entire penthouse of the Four Seasons for my homecoming party. We were in the middle of a romantic candlelight dinner when the doors were kicked open. It was Leo. He looked haggard and thin, his eyes bloodshot as he clutched a thick manila folder in his hand. He looked like a man possessed as he glared at me. "Victoria, you need to see this man for who he really is," Leo shouted, slamming the folder onto the table. While he was playing the part of your loyal assistant, he was busy embezzling over $10 million from the company and hiding it in offshore accounts. I have the receipts for every single transaction. He never cared about you, Victoria. He was just using you for the money. Victoria frowned and began flipping through the documents. But when she looked up at Leo, her expression was one of pure pity and disappointment. "Leo, when is this obsession going to end?" Victoria asked, her voice cold. "Davis went abroad to better himself, so he could be an asset to this company. You tried to destroy him a year ago, and now that he is back, you are trying to frame him with these forged documents." "Forged?" Leo screamed, his finger inches from my nose. "Victoria, wake up. Call the banks yourself. Look at the statements. He has been living like a king on your dime, and he only came back because he ran out of cash and needs to bleed you dry again." "I don't need to check anything," Victoria said, her voice like a blade. "I trust Davis implicitly. I know his character better than anyone. You, on the other hand, have done nothing but try to sabotage him with these pathetic lies. Do you actually have any talents other than being a nuisance?" "Lies? Sabotage?" Leo took a shaky breath, staring at the sister who chose a stranger over her own blood. "Fine, if you're so convinced that I am the liar that you won't even look at the evidence," he said, pulling a legal document from his jacket and slamming it onto the table. "I'm putting everything I own on the line. These are my personal shares in Sterling Enterprises. If I am wrong, they all go to Davis, no strings attached. But if I am right," he said, his eyes boring into Victoria's, "I want you to stand in front of the entire board and admit you were wrong. Admit that you let this snake ruin our family." My heart skipped a beat when I saw the document. All of his shares? Did that include his secret empire worth hundreds of billions? Realizing the sheer scale of the prize, I immediately shifted into my wronged innocent persona. "Fine, if that is what it takes to prove my innocence, I accept," I said, snatching the pen from Leo's hand and scrawling my signature across the bottom. Victoria didn't even have time to protest. Seeing me sign away my future with such a wounded look on my face only made her more furious with Leo. She stepped in front of me, shielding me like a lioness protecting her cub. "Leo, you have crossed a line. I trust Davis with my life, and I refuse to entertain your delusions. Since you were foolish enough to sign this, you can hand over your shares to him right now. Maybe being broke will finally teach you some humility. I clearly spoiled you far too much." That final insult seemed to snap something inside of Leo. He had risked everything on this one desperate move, and instead of exposing me, he had just handed me his entire fortune on a silver platter. A hollow, bitter laugh escaped his lips. "You would really choose a stranger over your own brother, Victoria? I'm telling the truth. If you won't believe my words, then maybe you will believe my death," he said. Before she could move, he turned and sprinted toward the edge of the penthouse balcony. "Leo, stop. What are you doing?" "Victoria sviketh." It was too late. We watched in absolute horror as Leo Sterling took a running start and hurled himself off the 88th floor balcony. A few seconds later, a sickening, muffled thud echoed up from the street below. Victoria ran to the railing and looked down at the broken, unrecognizable shape on the pavement. She collapsed onto the floor, her face a mask of shock and denial. Even I was stunned. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Was the hero actually dead? Something was very wrong. In the original story, Leo was supposed to make a triumphant return and destroy everyone who crossed him. I frantically searched my memories of the book, tried to figure out where I had deviated from the script. In the final chapter, He was definitely alive and smiling. Then it hit me like a lightning bolt. I stopped thinking about the ending and focused on the very beginning. When exactly did I enter this story? It all made sense now. The happy ending I remembered was from Leo's second life, after he had already died once and been reborn. In his first life, he was destined to suffer a tragic and lonely death. I had entered the story thinking I was just a doomed villain, never realizing that this was actually a story about a hero's second chance. We were currently living through the first timeline, the one where Leo Sterling loses everything and dies. I looked down at the crimson stain on the asphalt and felt a surge of dark excitement. If I hadn't been reborn with him, that meant he was starting his second life in a completely different timeline. In this world, I was the one who had won. The wail of sirens filled the night air as the paramedics arrived to collect what was left of Leo Sterling. After giving our statements to the police and reviewing the security footage that clearly showed it was a suicide, Victoria and I were finally allowed to go home. Victoria stood by the window of our apartment, her eyes red and swollen as she stared out at the New York City skyline. She never actually believed he would do it. I took her cold hand in mine and spoke with a firm, steady voice. "Victoria, we need to look into this." She looked at me with hollow eyes, clearly not following. "We need to investigate Leo's claims," I repeated, making sure she heard every word. "I want a full audit of every offshore account in my name. I want every single one of his accusations thoroughly vetted. Leo literally died for this, and we owe it to him to find the truth," I said. Victoria started shaking her head, her voice trembling. "No, Davis, that is not necessary. I believe you. That is exactly why we have to do it," I countered. I cut her off before she could argue further. "This isn't just about Leo. It is about my integrity. I want to be able to stand by your side, knowing that there isn't a single doubt left in your mind." Reluctantly, she finally agreed to the audit. Victoria spared no expense, hiring the best forensic accountants in the world to scour every financial record associated with my name. The results were exactly what I expected. I was clean as a whistle. Every dollar I had spent during my year abroad was traced back to my own personal savings. As for the sterling funds Leo had mentioned, they were sitting untouched in a high-yield account, having actually accrued a significant amount of interest for the company. The cold, hard facts erased the last of Victoria's guilt over Leo's death, replacing it with a deep sense of betrayal by her own brother. She threw her arms around me and held me tight. "Davis, I am so sorry I ever let him doubt you. I promise you, from this day forward, I will never let anyone question your loyalty again." I held her close, knowing that with Leo out of the picture, my path was clear. Victoria and I were married in a private ceremony a few months later. Now that I was officially a Sterling, I produced the agreement Leo had signed and began the process of taking over his secret assets to build my own global conglomerate. Leo's secret multi-billion-dollar empire was rebranded and absorbed into my new firm within months of his passing. By combining his resources with my own offshore capital, I created a corporate juggernaut. 3 years later, with the business running like a well-oiled machine, I decided it was time to take Victoria back to our estate in Greenwich for a much-needed vacation. But the moment we stepped through the front doors of the Sterling estate, we were met by a ghost from the past. Isabella Bennett was standing in the foyer. She had lost the innocence of her youth, replaced by the quiet, graceful strength of a mother. She was holding a little boy who looked to be about 3 or 4 years old. Isabella's entire body went rigid the second our eyes met. Victoria, completely oblivious to the tension, smiled and stepped forward to introduce us. "Davis, this is Isabella Bennett." She was essentially Leo's wife, she said, her voice tinged with a hint of sadness. "My brother was an idiot. He got her pregnant before they could even make it to the altar, and then he went and jumped off a building, leaving her to raise their son alone. It is a real tragedy." Victoria sighed, turning to formally introduce me to Isabella. Before Victoria could say another word, Isabella marched right up to me. Her eyes were bloodshot and swimming with tears. She shifted the child to one arm, and used her free hand to slam her fist into my chest. "Davis, you absolute bastard," she sobbed. "Where the hell have you been for the last 4 years?" The little boy in her arms just stared at me with wide, curious eyes before reaching out his tiny hand. He grabbed my collar with a familiarity that sent a chill down my spine, as if he had been waiting for me his entire life. I looked at the boy, whose features were a perfect mirror of my own, and suddenly Leo's final, desperate gamble made perfect sense. A terrifying realization exploded in my mind. Before I could even process it, I felt a sharp, painful pinch on my side. Victoria was standing right next to me, a pleasant smile on her face that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Oh, Davis," she whispered, "it seems like you have some very interesting things to explain to me." "Wait, honey, please. I can explain everything. It is not what it looks like," I stammered. I spent the next hour frantically explaining the entire situation from start to finish. When Isabella realized that I had only vanished because of my sudden bankruptcy and that I had no idea she was pregnant, she finally started to calm down, though her eyes were still filled with years of hurt and resentment. Victoria's expression softened as she realized that Isabella and I were the ones who were supposed to be together, and that her own family's business arrangements had been the thing that tore us apart. She realized that, in a way, she was the one who had stepped into the middle of our story. The grip on my side finally relaxed. After a long silence, she let out a weary sigh. "Fine, let's just put the past behind us. The child is innocent, and Isabella is part of this family now. But you had better make sure that neither of them ever feels neglected or mistreated again, Davis. Do I make myself clear?" A wave of relief and gratitude washed over me as I pulled Victoria into my arms and kissed her forehead. "You are the most incredible, generous woman I have ever known," I whispered. "Don't you worry. I'm going to take care of you, and I will make sure my sister-in-law and her son have everything they need." As you finish this story, remember this. Never let yourself be consumed by someone else's narrative. Be the one who stays calm and calculates their moves while the storm rages around them. Life is full of mistakes and regrets, but if you remain steadfast, the very dirt they try to bury you with will become the foundation of your ascent. Strip away the labels others try to force upon you. You don't need to be anyone's hero, but you must be the sole author of your own destiny.